let's get going. So welcome everyone on what for me at least is another lovely sunny afternoon to another webinar as part of our RSGB webinar series. So this one we're going to be talking about a project that we've recently completed at Agilysis with the Department for Transport on a review of STATS19 collection and use. So whether you collect STATS19 data, you process STATS19 data, you analyze STATS19 data, or however you're interacting with STATS19 data, hopefully this webinar will be useful for you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Nathan Harpham and I'm a principal consultant at Agilysis and I oversee this webinar series. Talking us through the work today, we have Bruce from Agilysis, Maggie from Department for Transport, and Matthew from Department for Transport. So we'll have about half an hour today for Bruce and Maggie to present the findings of this work to you, including some questions using Mentimeter for you guys to get involved in. You'll notice today that you'll have the ability to unmute and come on camera. And that's because after that first half an hour, we'd love to get a bit of discussion going. So obviously we'll have the Mentimeter questions throughout the presentations, but then afterwards, I'll invite you to come off mute and contribute to that discussion. Please do use the chat and the Q&A throughout, and I'll do my best to kind of bring together some of the comments and questions during the presentations for Bruce, Maggie and Matthew to answer as well. So I think that's enough from me. So I'll hand over to Bruce to get going with the findings.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathan, and good afternoon, everybody. So this was the title of the project that we undertook alongside Road Safety Great Britain on behalf of DFT last year. Review of STATS19 collection and use. And as you can see, I worked on this along with Maggie and other colleagues from the Department for Transport. You'll be hearing from Matthew later on, and with my colleagues Nathan and Scott here at Agilysis. And what we wanted to do was to try and understand what was going on with STATS19 collection, what the main issues were, and what the main actions that could possibly be taken to improve both the quality and the consistency of the STATS19 data, which, as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, I'm preaching to the converted, is an incredibly important aspect of road safety intelligence, allowing us to understand what needs to be done. But if we don't know that we can rely on it, then we've obviously got issues. There's one last quick reminder of the Menti code and the QR code. You can just go to menti.com, type in that 8-digit code, and it will take you to where the questions are. So, first of all, just to give you a quick overview of the structure of the work that we undertook, we began with a preliminary analysis of the STATS19 reporting trends over a long period of time on a force-by-force basis across all the forces in England and Wales, so we could try and understand what the present situation was. We then organised an online survey that was distributed through multiple channels, both through our own contacts here at Agilysis and also through Department for Transport and police contact lists, to try and get as many people as possible who were involved in the process of STATS19 to give us their views on what was going on. Some of the questions were qualitative, but some were designed to allow forces to give us quantitative output, give us a sense of what they felt were the important issues around STATS19 collection. And there were quite a lot of free text entry fields in the questionnaire, which was very deliberate. We didn't want to structure it so that the answers that we got were dictated by the questions that we asked. We wanted it to be possible for people to contribute their opinions. And we also asked people to give their email addresses if they were willing to be contacted for a follow-up. And thank you for those of you who did complete the questionnaire and did supply us with your email addresses. We contacted you to arrange follow-up interviews, and we conducted several of those interviews where we had custom questions, some that were general across our interpretation of the national trends, some of which were specific to the force or forces we were talking to allow us to discuss in more detail the themes that had arisen from the earlier work. We then linked the responses that we got from the questionnaires and the transcripts back to the free text from the online survey, presented our key findings to the Department for Transport a month or so ago, and we are now disseminating those key findings, partly because we'd like to get people's opinions on what they feel the most important takeaways are. You'll have an opportunity to vote on that later, and also partly to inform future stages of this work, which Matthew will be talking a bit more about later. So first of all, I'll just say a word or two about the preliminary analysis. We did do a long-term analysis of STATS19 trend individually for every force area, using adjusted severity, of course, to account for changes in reporting. Several specific things we looked at was the ratio of officer attendance as opposed to collisions reported across the desk, and how that changed with the gradual advent of online reporting, which happened in different force areas at different times, and of course still isn't available everywhere. We compared those long-term trends to the national STATS19 trend, and we also compared them to trends in reported injury collisions through the fire and rescue service, not because we expected them to match exactly, because it gave us a basis upon which to sense check. And fire and rescue service data might be a very valuable tool for people looking to do that in future, and Maggie will be telling you a bit more about that very shortly. We identified variations at force level, and they informed some of the questions we asked, both in the questionnaire and at the interview stage. The main issues we identified is that some forces had STATS19 trends that were quite noticeably out of step with other data sets, out of step with the national STATS19 trend, and or out of step with data returned by their local fire and rescue service. And when I mean out of step, I don't mean different in terms of absolute numbers. I mean going down when the other trend was going up, or vice versa. Noticeable differences in the stories that those trends were telling us. And we did that comparison both for all severities of collision, which means, of course, we were monitoring slight collisions. And as we know, slight collision reporting is one of those things that can vary quite a bit from one police force to another. But we also checked it specifically for serious injury collisions, where we might hope to find a more stable trend, but that wasn't always the case. We also noticed that some forces had an increase in no officer attended collisions in the period 2016 to 2020. So there was clearly a smaller proportion of collisions being reported by officers who were attending the scene, and there could have been all kinds of reasons for that. One possible reason, of course, was the advent of online reporting. And we noticed that those forces with variable amounts of no officer attended reporting had different experiences when online reporting was introduced. And the difficulty in identifying the difference that online reporting makes is something that I'll come back to a little bit later when we look at the questionnaire results. So there were anomalous local issues identified in some forces. And one of the most important ways that we were able to tell that is by comparing police force area trends with the trends for the same geographical area reported by the local fire and rescue services. And this is something that DFT have put in quite a lot of work into, gathering together and cleaning and making available the fire service data. It certainly helped us a lot when we were doing the preliminary analysis. And so because this is quite a useful tool for trying to understand trends and local differences, we thought it would be worth giving you a bit more insight into that. So seamlessly sewn into my presentation here is a section where Maggie from DFT is going to take you through the police and fire service data linkage. So bear with me, I'm driving her presentation, so she'll nod or wink or otherwise convey to me when she wants a slide to move on. Over to you, Maggie.
Thanks, Bruce. Yes, hi everyone, I'm Maggie. I work for DFT and specifically the Road Safety Statistics team. And indeed, the last few months I have been working on linking police and fire service data. Next, please. Lovely. So we have two data sources. First of all, STATS19. I should assume that everybody in here knows what STATS19 is. It's a database with information on collisions recorded by the police, and also the IRS. So the IRS is the incident recording system, which includes information of incidents attended by fire and rescue services. This database is maintained by the Home Office, and the Home Office only has jurisdiction in England, so it only involves England. But why do we want to link these two sources? Bruce has already mentioned that a bit, but I'm still gonna talk about our aims, Bruce. Sorry, go back, please. Thanks. But yeah, just quickly, the two main reasons that I would mention is because patterns that we see in STATS19 depend on the way each police force records STATS19. So linking STATS19 with other data sets like fire that I'm talking about today, or hospital data that a lot of people are trying to do, can help us decipher which trends in collision characteristics are uniform and which are due to the variability in police forces. And the second one is because the IRS data includes variables that are not recorded in STATS19. So in that way, we're adding value to STATS19 by providing more detailed information on the type of collisions that require fire service attendance. Next, please. So what have we done so far, or more like what have we done in the past? As DFT in 2022, we published a study to establish the feasibility of linking these two data sets. We received an extract of data from the Home Office between 2011 and 2020, but in the study we used the more recent years, so 2019 and 2020. And what we did was that we developed a linking methodology. Now that is a difficult task to achieve because there is no unique identifier in both data sets. So we started building on a methodology. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that unless you have any questions that I can address after. But what you should know is that the methodology is mainly based on the time and the distance difference. So when we have a collision on the same day recorded by STATS19 and by IRS, we look into when did they happen, what's the time difference between them, and also how far away were they from each other. Next, please. I should have a plot. Great. So based on that, we used a distance threshold of 5 miles. And as you can see in the plot, the x-axis is the distance and the y-axis is the number of collisions. Most of the linked collisions from the two data sets fall within 1 mile from each other. Similarly, next, Bruce, please. Similarly, for the time threshold, we use a 90-minute threshold. But again, if you look at the distribution plot, most of the linked collisions took place within 30 minutes of each other. And using that methodology for 2019 and 2020, we got a matching rate of IRS incidents to STATS19 collisions of about 70% for both years. So that was quite good. Next, please. And then what we started doing with Agilysis a few months ago, and what was our role in that, was to expand this study, to use this methodology to all the available data that we had, so between 2011 and 2020, provide the linked data sets to Agilysis, but also have an initial look at the time series of these collisions. So if you have a look at the plot here to the right, the average national pattern of about 40 police forces shows that we had more STATS19 collisions recorded, then fewer fire collisions, and even fewer linked collisions. So what does that tell us? First of all, I should mention, and I'm going to mention that a couple of times in this presentation, we are indicating, we're suggesting some results here. We cannot be extremely conclusive because, like I said, it's a difficult task to link these two data sets. So what does that plot indicate? Three main things that we see. First of all, maybe indeed this is what happened on the roads. This is the genuine pattern, and the fire services needed to attend less collisions compared to the police. Or maybe this is an issue of under-recording by the fire services. of the collisions they attended, or this simply reflects the quality of the data linking. Which one it is, we cannot be 100% sure, but starting to look into these timelines, this time series, we can see the patterns that then led us to the analysis and the further research that we and Agilysis mainly did. So we also had a look, next please, we also had a look into a police force breakdown, and we see three main categories. First of all, we have the forces that follow this average national pattern, and as you can see, for example, Cambridgeshire to the left or Essex to the right, again, they had this pattern with more STATS19, fewer fire and fewer link collisions, and give or take, they also had similar trends. And that was the majority of the forces. Then the second category is forces that don't follow that average pattern, which are the ones that I've included in the brackets. And if you have a look at this plot, Norfolk here, you can see that we had more fire collisions at points compared to STATS19, which is already odd enough. And also, generally, we see this flat pattern in STATS19 collisions. And the last category, next, please. Involves the forces that follow the average pattern, but they have something interesting along the way. Again, this involves the police forces that I've included in the brackets. And as you can see here for Surrey, we do see that we had more STATS19 collisions, but between 2016 and 2017, we see this decrease that actually less collisions were recorded compared to STATS19 collisions compared to fire collisions. And this is how we started thinking, what are these patterns? What do these patterns show us? Is that what actually happened on the roads? Or do we see that maybe something happened in the recording system of Surrey between 2016 and 2017? And based on that, Agilysis did a lot more work that Bruce is going to talk more about these results, but that's how we started identifying police forces that we want to talk to. We created the questionnaire. A lot of you have replied to that. We also held interviews with some of you, and this is how this research went on. So now I'm going to pause before my last slide for future work. I'm going to pause, and if we can go on the next page, I have our first Menti question. I hope we can see that. Can I? Yes, that involves. Can you please tell us if you have linked STATS19 to other data sources and if that was useful? Oh, I see some thumbs up, so hopefully you can see that. So yeah, please let us know. Also, if it's no, but maybe so far through this webinar you started to think it's useful, that's also good to know. Right, I see a lot of no, but it was, oh, great, that's good. Yes, it was useful. Yes, it was not useful. Lovely. For the person who said yes, but it was not useful, if you don't mind, just put in the chat some comments. Why was it not useful? Because that will help us understand a bit better what you do locally. But yeah, I can see that most of you haven't done that, but you think it would be useful. That's very good to know. So if we move on to my last question, I should have the second question here. I don't know if people can see that, or do we not have a second question?
No, there's only one question.
Oh, okay.
In there.
I'm sorry. Okay, lovely. Sorry. Okay, then I'll just ask the question. Yes, that's fine. I'm just going to ask the question then. For those who said yes and you have linked STATS19, can you just put in the chat with what other data you have linked them to? Or for those who said yes, no, but it would be useful, can you give us ideas what kind of data you would think would be useful to link STATS19 to? Because that will help us maybe looking at next steps. Maybe we can, if we have access to the data that you will suggest, maybe we can have a look at that as well. Lovely. Thank you very much. And then, yes, just talk a bit about current and future work that we do in DFT. At the end of this month, we're publishing one of our main publications. And alongside that, we want to publish our initial explanatory analysis of the linked collisions. So what we have done is that we have improved the linking methodology So we tested different thresholds of time and distance, and we actually decreased them to 1 mile and 30 minutes. And if you remember my first plots, that's where most of the link collisions were anyway. So now we believe that we have identified these collisions more realistically. But we also tested other factors, such as casualty, age, and sex, which I thought was going to be gold, but turns out it wasn't useful at all, mainly because the casualty age is not very well recorded by the fire services. Again, I'm not expanding on that, but if you want to know why that is, I can address that later. But overall, our main goal remains to try and see how does fire data compare to STATS19 and what does that tell us about STATS19 if it tells us anything. And what you can expect to see in that report is trends over time, but also different breakdowns such as police force, fire service type, collision severity, and road class. These are the first factors that we looked into, but hopefully, since this is the first analysis, in the future we can add more to that. And if I can just leave you with a message, a take-home message from that so far, is that please keep in mind that this work offers, it doesn't offer definitive conclusions, but instead it aims to highlight areas for future exploration and also to shine some light on the areas or police forces that maybe we should be contacting. I think that's everything from me, Bruce. I have one thank you slide. Yes, thank you very much. This is our contact details. I believe we can share that later. Please, any questions, that just put them in the chat and we'll address them in the discussion. Back to you, Bruce. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Maggie. And I'll mention as we go through the remainder of the presentation a couple of places where the fact that we have Fire and Rescue Service data to use as a benchmark for police force area trends in collision reporting could be a very useful metric for some people in being able to identify how reliable the reporting is, not only on the police side, but also on the FRS side. So I want to say a little bit now about the responses that we got from the survey, which we put out. It was sent out to, I don't know, hundreds of email addresses. Some of you may have got it more than once because we distributed it through multiple channels. Our apologies if that was the case. But we received a total of 75 responses to the surveys, 37 of which were complete, every question was answered, and 38 of which were partial. We're not too dismayed about the partial results. Obviously, not every aspect of STATS19 reporting is the same person's job, and it's entirely understandable if people skip over bits where they're not in a position to provide a response. But where we did receive partial responses, we did take those responses into account. And then based on those who said they were happy for us to contact them, we then conducted 5 in-depth interviews where we conducted a lengthy chat with people representing different forces. In some areas, of course, a single force has its own collection arrangements. In some cases, several geographically adjacent forces work together to do this. And you can see that 2 of the interviews we conducted were to people who were involved in data collection across multiple police force areas. So our response rate was very good. In fact, we got response from 93% of the police forces in England and Wales, which frankly is better than we thought we would get. So thank you all again for your participation in this. Out of those 40 forces who provided some response, 28 of them, we got at least one respondent who gave us a full response. So we got a complete response to the survey from 2/3 of the forces, and the 9 police force areas that were represented in our interviews represents about 20% of the police forces in England and Wales. So although it wasn't exhaustive, it was reasonably representative, and we're fairly happy with those response results. So we're now going to play a little bit of a guessing game, so brace yourself for a bit more audience participation. I've picked out 3 of the questions that we asked during the survey, and I'm going to ask everybody attending the webinar to have a little bit of a guess to what they think the answer would be. And we're asking these questions in terms of what percentage of the respondents do you think said a thing? So I'm not just asking you what you said or what you guess your force area would have said, but what percentage of the police forces in England and Wales generally would say this thing? That's the question that's being asked. So it's a little bit of a go, and we'll see how surprised people are when they see that. So this first one is, what percentage of the respondents to our survey who supplied an answer, what percentage of the respondents say that their police force area delivers some STATS19 training to officers? That's not comprehensive STATS19 training, not ideal STATS19 training, but some STATS19 training. What percentage of respondents do you think said that? So I'll just give everybody a moment or two to come up with some responses. An interesting sub-question in this, of course, is the extent to which being able to see other people's responses may influence future responses, but I'm sure you're all much more strong-minded than to allow such a thing to influence you. Okay, so most people take what is, to be absolutely honest, my expectation, which is there are probably quite a lot of forces out there that aren't doing that. Probably a majority of forces are out there aren't delivering some STATS19 training to officers. So I would have been with the somewhat more kind of cynical majority down at the lower end of that scale. So now I'm going to reveal the answer. And the answer is that 78% of our respondents stated that some STATS19 training was delivered to officers by their force. Some STATS19 training, as in more than none. Yeah. However, over half of our respondents, 54% of them, considered that their force's current STATS19 training guidance was ineffective. So while there's more STATS19 training going on out there than you might suppose, it's entirely possible that quite a lot of it isn't really having the desired effect in terms of giving us robust and consistent and reliable output. So it's there, but maybe it's not so great, was what our sample suggested. So let's move on and have another play that game again with a second question. Here we are. Here is the second question. So what percentage of the respondents do you think say that their force quality assures some recorded details for at least half of STATS19 reports? That's not all recorded details, but some recorded details. I would guess that location is perhaps among the things that would be most likely to get quality assured. But how many forces do you think check something in at least half of their STATS19 records? Okay, we're getting a more mixed bag to that question. People thinking, well, probably not that many. Some people thinking, yeah, probably about at least half of forces get round to that. And it's delightful to see a few optimists up there at 71 to 80% of respondents are saying, yes, we check something in at least half of records. So let's see what the answer is. And the answer is that the optimists are right. 79% of respondents say that they quality assure something in at least half of STATS19 reports. That sounds a little high to me as well, if I'm honest, but we did say some recorded details, so perhaps that means we're checking the location or we're doing some basic QA for at least half of the reports. But it does mean that there is quality assurance going on out there. People are making an effort to do what they can with the resources they've got to try and verify things. It's interesting, you'll see under there that only 59% of respondents said specifically that they verified severity for at least half of the reported STATS19 serious injuries. So that does suggest that we're getting less checking of severity than we are of other things, perhaps like date and location. And of course, severity is a very key metric that has changed with the recent STATS19 review. We now have detailed severity and injury codes. So making sure that we can rely on that information will be very important going forward. One more game. Let's have a little guess at one more of the questions. And this one is, what percentage of respondents want the Department for Transport to provide further support and guidance in recording STATS19 data? So who wants, how many forces do you think want Matthew to slip on his Superman uniform and fly around the country solving everybody's problems? And now this is interesting. Most of our respondents reckon that most people Want Matthew dressed as Superman? Yes, they do. That's what you expect the respondents to our survey to have said. Well, let's have a look and find out what the actual answer is. The answer is, surprisingly, only 53% of respondents thought that DFT should provide further support and guidance. I would have expected that to be higher, and I think the response we've just seen in that survey bears out that thought but maybe there are some people who feel that they don't need it, or they're fine as they are, thank you. I don't know. We did follow up by asking how many people used STATS19, the detailed guidance on what STATS19 is supposed to mean to inform their reporting, and apparently nearly 60% of respondents do use it, although I suspect that in this case our respondents may not be typical of the people who are filling in the bulk of the reports, but there we have it. So there are some answers that we got to the quantitative questions that we asked in our survey. I'm just going to give you one more quantitative question, coming back to what I said earlier on about the conflicting information that we had about the effects of online reporting on issues. And this is something where the difference in the percentage of officer reported collisions, which is quite considerable across different forces, was suggesting to us that there was a lot of local variation. And that was also suggested by our response to a question about this. 62% of our respondents believe that online reporting has influenced how often officers attend scenes, but it was very noticeable that for that question we got a far higher level of people answering not sure than was the case for any of the other questions. For all of the other questions, we got the odd respondent who said not sure, and we excluded those, of course, when we were calculating the percentages. But in order to calculate this percentage, we had to exclude 40% of the responses, because nearly half the respondents were not sure what effect online reporting has. And I think that does indicate that there's quite a lot of uncertainty out there, even within forces, about what the consequences of online reporting are, never mind when you start trying to compare between forces. So I think the telling thing there is how many people were not sure. So I want to move on now, and I'm very conscious that we're running out of time, so I'm going to do this quite quickly to just have a quick look at some of the things that arose from the qualitative side of the work that we did. And there were three main issues that arose out of the qualitative responses, both free text in the survey and in the interviews. One was the value of collaboration. Many people mentioned the support and partnership working from local organisations, which was very helpful, particularly for quality assurance. But the nature of the arrangements varied dramatically from force to force, and because of that variation there was also a variation in what role the partner organisations could or were able to play in the STATS19 reporting process. Those thought balloons are a digest of the things that people typed into free text responses about partnership working. There are all kinds of different organisations involved in different degrees in different places, and quite often those partner organisations have responsibilities delegated to them by the police, and that can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. Working with partners can be good, but working with partners can be bad if the partners themselves are struggling to resource the things that the police are expecting them to do. So there are challenges out there around collaboration and where the STATS19 reporting depends on that. The second area where we got a lot of people giving us qualitative response, unsurprisingly, was on the issue of data quality. Data quality is constantly under threat, it seems. It's threatened, obviously, by shortage of available resources. It's threatened by other policing priorities. And it's made more difficult by online reporting, whether that's online reporting by members of the public or whether that's police officers themselves using different online tools, where in days gone by they might have been using more physical reporting methods. However, we also got the clear message that data quality is something that you can improve. You don't just shrug your shoulders and walk away from this. By deploying specialist resource, by deploying effective training and by using online validation, it is possible to address the data quality challenges. Here's a sample of some things that people said during the interviews. Of course, police officers get pulled off to other duties. There are still some issues for people where they feel that the crash system, where it's used by officers, could be made easier to use. So there are barriers, but there's also opportunities there. If you do go in there and get stuck into data quality, there are benefits to be had from it. And there was a general feeling that once police officers understand the reason why they are being asked to collect this information, the quality all of a sudden improves. The bold bits in these quotes, by the way, is my choice of emphasis, not the choice of emphasis of the original speaker. The bold bits are the bits I think are particularly important. Once people understand the importance of stuff, they do it, don't they? Well, yes, they do. So on to the third and final area that came out for us from the qualitative work, the challenges of trying to monitor your own trends. Several people said, volunteered it in the free text or responded in the interviews, that making direct comparisons between force areas was difficult because there was so much regional variation. The areas themselves are very distinct, and there are also, as we've seen, different levels of partner engagement, different levels of available resource, different reporting methodologies, means you sometimes feel, as this quote suggests, like you're comparing apples and pears when you compare one force to another. So how do you go about even monitoring your trends? How can you keep track of it? Especially when data validation is so often out to a third-party organization. Sometimes you might find that third-party organizations outside the police are actually better at recording things and can give you a better sense. I will allow to remain anonymous the police service that said to us they thought the fire service was better at reporting, but it does indicate that the work that Maggie has done and that DFT I know are going to spread round, making it possible for you to compare your trends against the fire service trends, bearing in mind, of course, what you know about what goes on the ground at local level, could be a useful way of monitoring your trends going forward in the future. So finally, here are the three actions that people were most likely to request as an output of all this in order to improve STATS19 reporting. What changes could we make? What national standards could we introduce that would help to make STATS19 a more uniformly reliable resource? The first one was development and improvement of reporting systems. I've already mentioned improving the crash interface. People specifically said that they would like parts of crash to automatically populate based on connections to other data sources, vehicle details, for example. They would like more validation. And they would like guidance and quick reference notes to be built into the interface of online reporting systems so that they were right there so people could refer to them as they were completing the data. And this comment applied both to systems used by police officers and to systems used by members of the public. It was felt that if there was information right there and handy, that would considerably improve things. The second respect in which our respondents felt that a national standard could be constructive was in officer training. The request came from several directions for nationally sourced training materials to avoid the reliance on osmosis, I've called it in that first section. By that I mean that you rely on more experienced police officers to train their newer and less experienced colleagues. Of course, that's a very important thing. The passing on of experience is essential to record organizational knowledge, but if you rely on it exclusively as being the only way that people learn to do things, it can result in degradation or mistakes being passed on from one to another. So it was felt that national training materials, both for training new officers and as refresher courses for officers who've maybe not thought about it for a while, would be useful. And the main thing that these courses should do was emphasize why the data was being collected, why it matters that it's right, and what other people do with it, why highway authorities and national highways and DFT and many other people rely on this data to do useful things. And finally, there's a need for guidance for officers and analysts to make sure that we're consistent. Two particular areas that were mentioned in that regard is the new injury codes that allow us to collect detailed severity. We've got to make sure those are consistent. Otherwise, we might be no further forward from where we were in the old days when it was just a tick box between serious and slight. The road safety factors are obviously very new to many people, and it was certainly true that contributory factor collection varied quite considerably from force to force across the country. We want to make sure that road safety factors are more widely, uniformly understood, so we get a more consistent data set. And comparative analytical approaches to allow you to measure how your STATS19 collection is going relative to national trends and relative to other local sources is something that many forces feel they're not sure how to do, and is something that guidance on would be appreciated. And I personally think that the fire service data, at least in some areas, could be a very useful way of just benchmarking your trend, sense checking it, and seeing if you're on track. So I'm going to give the final word to some of the people who very kindly gave up their time to give interviews. And they said that if we did train focusing on casualty reductions, it would focus the minds of police officers, remind them of the reason that we're doing this. We're not talking days and days of work here, people say. We don't want long training courses. We want pithy things that are short and to the point and remind them why. The road safety factors in particular are new to many people and obviously need a bit of work. We do need a level of customization at local level. Each force needs to be able to do what they feel is best for their own force. And it would also be nice if a sense of how to go about benchmarking would be a helpful thing. Okay, so that's got to the end of the content that we've got here. We've got one more Menti, but we're moving on now to think about what does all this mean? What ought we to be doing as an outcome of this? And what we've got here are 7 things that people suggested that they would like to see happen in the responses to our survey and in our interviews. And what we'd like you to do is have a go at ranking those in the order of how useful you feel those would be to you. So you should be able to click on Menti and slide them up and down and put them in the order that you think would be most useful to you. They're in an arbitrary order at the moment. So if you click on that, you should be able to do that. I see that nobody's responding. Is that because everybody's thinking about it or because the question is not working? I'm hoping everybody's thinking about it. So have a little, just have a quick think about that. Think about, rank those things in descending order of how useful you feel that they would be to you, and then submit your answer. Nathan, can you see the back end? You've got an idea of how many people have had a chance to submit a response. I just want to give people a minute to this because this will be a very important outcome for the department in getting a sense on what your priorities are, the support that you would most likely to see. More than half of the respondents to our survey said that they wanted more support from DFT. That does leave the question, what should that support look like? And this is your opportunity to express an opinion about that.
We can see, Bruce, at the bottom there. So 21 people, 22 people now have responded.
Great.
So yeah, I think it takes a little bit of time to give it some thought.
Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you there, Nathan, and let you allow people to have an opportunity to contribute a bit to discussion. Perhaps we'll leave that on the screen to allow as many people as possible time to make their opinions known.
That sounds good. Thanks very much, Bruce. Yeah, so please do keep filling that in as we go with some discussion. There was a quick question from Peter in the Q&A about a unique identifier. Maggie or Matthew, do you want to comment on that?
Yep, yeah, that's me. Yes, so why is there no unique identifier? That is because the two systems, recording systems, are completely different. So each one of them has their own ID for each collision. So STATS19 has an accident ID, and then fire. The IRS has an incident ID, but these two don't match between them because they are completely independent from each other. And that's why they both record time, date, and location. We have X and Y coordinates. So based on them, this is how we do the linking. But even them, they're not exactly the same. So the time, the police attended can vary a bit from the time that the fire attended, even though it was the same collision. And that's why we use these thresholds. So we say if something took place within 30 minutes, then we think that it's the same collision. But yeah, there's no unique identifier because they are completely separate systems.
Okay. I don't know if this is true for everyone, but the screen's frozen for me. Is that true for you, Matthew? Yeah. Hopefully we're still getting the responses through. Yeah, that's true for others too. Okay. So one thing I picked up during the presentation was a lot of people haven't linked STATS19 to other data sources, but would like to. So I wondered if anyone wanted to comment on maybe firstly why you haven't linked. And I think I could guess why based on the data sources that were put in the chat, but why you haven't linked, and also what in particular you think that would add to the kind of analysis that you're doing. Does anyone want to come in on that? Time it takes. That makes sense.
So I'll come in if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah,
Just to
sorry,
say
I'm
why-
replying
why-
to another question as well. So
Yeah.
yes.
Why we haven't done more at DFT is because we've had difficulty getting hold of some of the data sets, and in particular hospital data, where we have tried for, well, I think several years actually. And we've had a few sort of stops and starts. We've done a little bit. We've done some feasibility studies that we've not been able to build on because we haven't been able to access the data we need. But there is a project at the moment called Prana. So I think you can probably Google that, which is being run by the University of Southampton or the hospital trust down there to create a secure environment, which will hopefully in time and hopefully at some point later this year bring together the STATS19 data set from us and the NHS data for the whole of England and possibly some data for Wales as well. So we're hopeful that there will be something at some point later this year, and if that does come to fruition, then there should be a mechanism for people like on this call to actually access the data in a secure environment, having gone through the necessary processes. So I think, hopefully watch this space for that.
Thanks, Matthew. And thanks for your comments in the chat. Everything's really helpful for us and for DFT in particular moving forward. There's a question from Lauren in the Q&A. Maggie, is that something that you were answering?
I haven't seen that. Sorry, I'm still trying to answer the previous question for the identifier. So they just, right, let me just answer the one that I have seen. So Peter also asked about should they be the same, an identifier? And of course, yes, it would be great if we had the same identifier for everything, across all systems, hospital data, fire data, police forces. But I don't know how. I think it would take a lot of effort to try and create something like that. And I don't know how possible it could be, because when we have, let's just say within an hour, if the same police force attends 5 collisions, but then the fire services is only needed in 2, this identifier, this ID will change instantly. So I don't know how realistic it is that we could have one, but yes, of course, it would be great if we had a similar answer. We could just link all the data sets instantly.
And then
Sorry,
the other
I'm
question
trying,
from Lauren was about, is the fire data available to local authorities from the Home Office? So that might be a you or Matthew question.
Yes, I think Matthew, I'm not sure I know that if anyone can request that from the Home Office.
I'm not sure I do either, but I would imagine that either from the Home Office or the local Fire and Rescue Service, I think with the necessary data sharing agreements in place, I can't see why that wouldn't be possible. I've certainly heard of things that have been done at a local level, comparing the data. But I think in some areas it may be that I think in some areas the STATS19 data is actually considered to be more useful. It has more variables in. So we've certainly done some work with the NFCC where they use STATS19 rather than the IRS data. But yeah, I think if you've got local contacts, or we can provide details for the Home Office team if that's helpful.
And also, Matthew, is there any progress on other data sets that the DFT are looking at? I think we are trying to look, not necessarily only our team, at hospital data, but this is quite difficult because we don't have access to that data either. And yes, anything else you want to add on that, Matthew?
Yes, I mean, there's two things here. One is what we're doing in the road safety stats team, and our main job is to sort of collate and curate the STATS19, the national STATS19 data set, and then we try to link it to other things where possible. So the fire service, because we were able to get hold of the data, the hospital data, as you allude to, Maggie, and we're working, hoping to work with the University Hospital Southampton on that one. And then we've got hopes to do some other stuff, but it's quite difficult to get through all the forms and permissions. The other aspect of this is the bigger picture, which is beyond the STATS19 team, which is looking at the forthcoming road safety strategy. I think I'm allowed to say that there is going to be a road safety strategy at some point this year, although I think we might have said that for a few years. And as part of that, the road safety investigation branch is going to be considered, and that's going to consider the approach to data and linking data and using that to then explore road safety risk and better understand the picture. There's work ongoing in that space. I can't say much more about it because, to be honest, I don't actually know how it's going to go. It's waiting for people above my pay grade, but hopefully later this year there will be some movement in the right direction on that.
Thanks, Matthew. I think it's probably about time for you to wrap up, but just as Matthew is wrapping up, question from Paul about collision data from rail authorities. So if anyone's got any comments on that, please do comment on that question directly or in the chat as well. Right, Matthew, over to you to conclude.
Okay, did you get my last slide in here, or am I just gonna? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm just going to summarise what we think are the next steps following on from this work that Bruce and Maggie have spoken about. So I think there's three elements to this. The first, which is coming up in a couple of weeks' time, is to publish the initial findings, basically what Bruce and Maggie have spoken about already. So the headline findings from the survey, and as Maggie said, the analysis of the fire data compared to STATS19 as well. We're hoping to put those out alongside the provisional 2024 statistics. That will be on the Thursday, the 29th of May. I think it's the 29th. Yes. So there's a date for your diary. We're not expecting it to break the internet, but we provide a reference to the work that's been done to help users of the data understand, as much as we know about some of its strengths and weaknesses. So that's the first element. The next bit, if you can click on, please, Nathan. Yeah, thank you. So this is then about what do we do with the things we've learned from this work, and that's where that previous Menti question came in really handy for us. So yes, we're trying to take forward as many of the actions as we can with the resources available and where things are within our control. So I don't really need to manage expectations here. I don't want to raise hopes that we're going to be able to solve all these problems or solve all the issues that have been identified. Of course, we're not going to do that, but hopefully there are some relatively quick wins that we can take forward. So I think stuff around providing guidance on the value of STATS19 would be one we should be able to help with. I think that one might have been near the top, so that was quite nice. So yes, thank you very much for all your input on that. That will help us to prioritise the next actions. And then I think the third element, if you can click, it's just so that's sort of to build on the work that's been done so far. Inevitably, with something like this, we've learned a lot of useful stuff, but it probably begs more questions, or it begs further questions, maybe even more questions than it sort of answers. So we think there's a lot more that we could do in a further in a further phase during this coming year. So we've got a final Menti question, I think, in a moment on that, asking for your help to to direct us. But the final thing I think just for this one was to say, yeah, if you do have any comments on this work or STATS19, anything you think we could be doing to help or doing better, as I say, we've got a relatively small team here, but we will certainly take comments and suggestions to address whenever we can. And we certainly want to try and improve the quality of STATS19 data as far as possible, or if we can't actually address things in the data, then at least how we communicate things to the users of the statistics so they can understand the limitations better. So I think that was all I was going to say, and that just leaves time for the final question. Thank you.
Yeah, so as Matthew says, we're planning a second phase of this research into STATS19 this coming year. So yeah, we'd love for some input on which area you think would be the most useful for us to investigate. So that being road safety factors and how that's been going and impacted reporting and how they compare to CFs, etc. Severity, so looking at trends in severity, how injury-based reporting and splitting up serious has affected things. Data linking we've already discussed in a fair amount of detail, and then also online reporting. If you do have another idea, if you're in the something else category, then please do drop it in the chat or get in touch afterwards, because we'd love to hear any ideas for the stuff that you think is the most useful for us to investigate further. Give it another 30 seconds for people to jump in. It'd be 2 clear winners. Okay. Great. I'll just let the last few responses trickle in, but thank you very much all for your participation. It's been really helpful, your participation in the Mentimeter, particularly for Matthew and Maggie at DFT, and hopefully that was useful. It was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the research that we did and a few different kind of discussion points coming in there. But yeah, findings will be published in May. If you have any questions about the research, then please do get in touch with Bruce or myself. We'd be happy to chat to you further, and we'd love for more input this next year in terms of whatever we investigate from this list here. So please do get in touch if you feel like you have some input that would very much add to that piece of research. And with that, and with a minute to spare, we'll bid you goodbye, and more webinars from June, so hope to see you for those as well. Cheerio.